Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases since 1984. In 1993, he heard disturbing reports about a new infectious disease in Kentucky. He was troubled, but his superiors ignored the problem. When the disease hit, he knew that only he could stop it. He commandeered a fire truck and drove himself to Muldrow, humanity's last hope for avoiding the zombie apocalypse. Only he could possibly find a cure. Okay, just kill a few more zombies and we can get to killing the disease. This guy's... No! Dagnabbit, I gotta kill. Later, in his secret lab... Okay, let's see now. How bad does this look? Oh, it's just a scratch. No big deal. A little bit of disinfectant and I'll be fine. Damn it, I'm queasy. I'm gonna die from the zombification. That's not fair. This is not right. I am resilient. I have resilience. I have the resilience trait. A scratch should have like 0 chance of getting me. I'm just gonna die here. It took me a long time to die, and I'm dying, and I can't do anything about it. I'm gonna sit here until like, dang it, this is wrong. Resilience is supposed to protect you. I got 1 scratch, and I died. How could that possibly happen? You know what? I'm gonna find out exactly what resilience and prone to illness and thick-skinned and thin-skinned do, and I'm gonna start by looking at the wiki. When you got a zombie question and you want to know the facts, Reddit has conflicting answers and the wiki's sometimes wrong. Ask Ed, he'll look it up in the code, then do a video and get subscribers maybe. Ask Ed, ask Ed. This is the new theme song even though it doesn't rhyme. Okay, I'm going to start by looking at the Project Zomboid wiki on the traits. So the first trait is resilient, which has a negative 70% infection rate. Negative 70. I'm going to check that out. Thick-skinned, same, very similar. 23%. That's a very specific and odd number. 23% less likely to get scratched, lacerated, or bitten. All right. As we go to the negatives, prone to illness, negative 300% infection rate, we'll be checking that number. And then last, thin-skinned, 30% more likely to get scratched, lacerated, or bitten. That seems pretty reasonable. It's a nice round 10% multiplier number. Negative 300% seems like a lot, so I'm suspicious of that. I'm least suspicious of a number like 30%. 23% is weird. It's a weird number to have. 23% less likely. That's a weird number to have. So I'm suspicious of that. Negative 70% infection rate. That seems pretty strange. It seemed high, but it's like, okay, well, I can see how that works. So we'll take a look at the code next. So I know where the code lives. It's in the install directory, and most of the Project Zomboid classes that have to do with the actual Project Zomboid game, it resides in Zombie. I mean, I've just looked at some of the code before, so I know this is where to go. I'm going to be using a tool called grep, which is a command line tool that searches through files for various phrases. So in this case, I'm going to do grep /i/r resilient. I'm looking for resilient in all these files. And one of the advantages of knowing roughly where it is that it doesn't have to search through all my computer, which will take a long time. I put a few flags. -I means it's case insensitive, so this covers resilient small r, resilient large r, resilient all caps, however you want to capitalize it. And -r means it does a recursive search, which means it'll search this directory and all the directories below it and all of their directories below it, so I don't have to, it won't just search this directory. So I do a little search there, and I come up with binary characters. ISO game character traits. Okay, well, resilient is a trait, so that makes sense. And in body damage dot class, which is probably where we want to go if we want to see how resilient affects damage. I'll also do prone to illness, and it's the same thing. So if we want to find out things about resilient or prone to illness in the code, it looks like I'm going to be looking at body damage dot class. So let's start there. So here I am at javadecomilers.com, where I'm going to use one of the decompilers. Now, the way Java works is that the coder codes up the code in Java, which is a coding language. And that's totally understandable. Basically, I write my code in Java. The Java compiler converts it into bytecode, which has smaller commands and requires less processing power for a computer to understand, but is harder for a human to read. That's not a very good description, but I'm moving on. It's almost like it compresses it, except there's no guarantee that it'll be compressed, I'm pretty sure. It just converts it. Now, when Project Zomboid is installed on my computer, it is the bytecode. And so what I'm doing is using a decompiler to expand the bytecode that's on my computer back into something that humans can easily understand. Now, the problem is that the original compiler that IndyStone used took out some of the unnecessary stuff from the original Java code, because computers don't need good variable names, for example. So the decompiler gives me names like N1, N2, B1, B2. It just automatically generates these non-descriptive names. Oh well. There are also some other things that decompilers can't do perfectly, depending on the decompiler. So sometimes what looks like a weird situation is actually the decompiler not actually being able to accurately reconstruct the original code. And so we have to take that into consideration. Anyway, like I said, I'm using javadecomilers.com because it gives me an option to use different compilers. I'm using Procyon because it's the first option on the list, and it worked for me when I tried it before. I used to use this thing called JD GUI, which is actually on my computer, so I don't have to send the file to a website and have it take it back to me. But ever since Project Zomboid moved to Java 15 in build 4151, JD GUI doesn't work with that code anymore, so it doesn't work with such a recent version of Java. So that's why I went to this website, and Procyon looks good. So the first thing I'm going to do is look for the body damage class. And so I've already body damage, upload and decompile. And after some time, it comes up. And I am going to do a search for resilient. Hey, 4 hits. So this first hit, resilient, is set, and you can see prone to illness is right here next to it. Catch a cold delta. So I'm not going to worry about this right now because it has to do with catching a cold. And resilient 0.45F. Okay, well, we'll come back to that. Second hit, update cold, is an update cold. The function update cold, so also has to do with catching a cold. The third hit is in the same function, having to do with catching a cold. And the fourth, pick mortality duration. Okay, well, let's go to the cold one real quick, since I know it's faster to understand, or there's an easier explanation. So catch a cold delta. So this has to do, like Resilient said. What did the Resilient say way back when? Negative 70% infection rate. Now right here, it looks like it's a 55% less infection if this is the piece of code. If it isn't, then 1.5, like, this looks like it might be a 50% chance of doing something good. This is probably cold progression, so this isn't catching a cold since it's related to cold progression rate. So maybe whether it gets bad fast or how fast you heal from it. This one is another cold progression rate, 80% or 20% reduction. This one again is like a 50% more rate, something like that. So there's nothing in here that says 70%. If we really wanted to look into it, we could calculate. It probably has to do with this, and I think it's probably, first guess without looking deep into it, 50%, 55% chance, 55% better chance of avoiding a cold. Infection rate is only the infection rate is 45% of what it normally would be, or you could call it, it's 55% chance of avoiding it. Okay, and prone to illness is right here, 1.7%. So 70% chance better of catching it, or 50% chance less of breaking it or getting rid of it, something like that. I'm not really going to go into it because who cares? It's just a cold. I'm not even sure. I mean, my characters have caught colds. It's kind of hard to do, and it's not that big of a deal, although it makes sneaking around harder. What we really want to come here to look at is the mortality duration. So these are the only 4 hits about resilient. So, and this last one is mortality duration, which seems pretty good. Yeah. 1.25 if it's resilient, and 0.75 if it's prone to illness. And if we take a look around here, we take a look at the sandbox options, instance, lore, mortality rate, get value. Oh, let's take a look at what that is. Mortality, infection mortality. This is where it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 options from instant to never. So how long it takes for you to die once you're infected. And I think default is 2 to 3 days. I know D-Jax likes 0 to 12 hours, and I think Toddy likes instant, and everybody else likes something different. No big deal, but we just know what that is. 7 is never, 0 is, or 1 is instant. We go back here, and 7 never, -1. It returns -1. So mortality duration, if it's set to 7, which is never, then it returns -1, which means never. So everything else, and instant returns 0. Everything else is some kind of multiplier based on whether we're going with seconds, whether we're going with hours or minutes, whether we're going with days, and resilient multiplies by 1.25. So 25% longer. 25%. It takes you 25% longer to die when you're zombified if you have resilient. And I hear everybody saying right now, big whoop, I want to die anyway. I mean, is there really that much of an advantage for living longer? I mean, you can do a few things before you die, but if you're already going to be living for 2 to 3 days, that's what happened with my Anthony Fauci. Is like, I'm trying to die, I'm infected. How long is this going to take? Oh, he's resilient, so it's going to take even longer. Great, thanks. Prone to illness 0.75. So the other thing is, this makes prone to illness even more free points if you're playing with either no mortality or instant mortality, because it doesn't matter. And it makes resilient more worthless. So that's the story about resilient. Resilient is just to increase how long it takes for you to die, and it prevents you from catching colds. Yay, wow, that's really worth the, how many points is resilient? Oh my gosh, whatever it is, I don't want it anymore. So let's move on and take a look at ThickSkinned and ThinSkinned. So ThickSkinned shows up in character class, character traits class, and body damage. And since body damage is where we've been messing around, let's take a look at that. Body damage. ThickSkinned. There's only one instance of ThickSkinned, and ThinSkinned is right here. Great. And it is in the function add random damage from zombie. This looks like where we want to be. So let's dig into this a little bit. Whatever N5 is, it was probably named something a lot better than N5 before the compiler and then decompiler got a hold of it. Whatever it is, ThickSkinned divides it by 1.3. And ThinSkinned multiplies it by 1.3, which is interesting. So ThickSkinned, and since this number is an integer, this number is an integer, ThickSkinned will make this number smaller, and ThinSkinned will make this number larger. And I've already taken a look at it, which is why I mentioned this. Then we get a few other things. For simplicity, I'm going to gloss over some of this, and death doesn't really matter. Let's not worry about this. If equals, it could be a test thing, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. But let's just note that it deals with rear vulnerability. So let's take a look at rear vulnerability options, 1 and 2 and whatever else under character. Rear vulnerability, low, medium, and high. Low is 1, medium is 2, high is 3. So, chance of being bitten when a zombie attacks you from behind. Okay, good to know. So low means this, medium means this, and high is the default. So high means that this is going to go low, and low means that N5 is going to go up, which is interesting because that's kind of the opposite of what we're seeing. With thick-skinned, N5 goes down. With thin-skinned, N5 goes up. But with low rear vulnerability, N5 goes up. And with high rear vulnerability goes down. Now this is a test, so it might be test code or something, because it is based on something called test.side. I'm not sure, but it makes me a little suspicious. So, where it gets really interesting, it talks a little bit about crawlers here. If the zombie's crawling, we'll skip that. But where it gets really interesting to me is right here. If rand.next 100 is greater than n5. N5 is the number that we've been talking about, that thick-skinned decreases and thin-skinned increases. So this rand next 100 is like a D100 roll. And so if the D100 roll beats whatever n5 is, let's just say it's 50 and you get a 73, then Boolean B2 equals true, 3 equals false. Then we have a few other random rolls to see if it's N7 or it beats another roll beats N7, another roll beats N6. Let's not look at that right now. Let's just assume it just beat N5, and which means B2 is true and B3 is false. What happens if B2 is true? Well, this code I find kind of interesting, because it gets the value of get body part clothing defense. Okay, so this looks like armor on your arm or whatever. Okay, gets the value. Then it plays a zombie scratch. And then it checks to see if the value, it compares the value to the value, and if it doesn't beat it, then it returns false, which means no damage. So this explains the situation where you're fighting a zombie and it grabs on you and you hear the crunch, and then you get away from it or kill it, and then you look at your damage and you're like, oh, no damage. The armor must have taken care of it. But I heard the scratch, and that's why. This is the code which shows us where that happens. And if they didn't want that to happen, then they would move this like to after. Oh, well, but it's okay because it did get your armor, right? But if you find it really distressing, or if everybody found it distressing that even when your armor protects you, you still hear that crunch, then they would move this to after determining whether or not the armor protects you. And then after that, add a hole. Okay, talking about whether adding a hole in your body part, I guess. Add damage and set scratched. Oh, okay, that's the part that we want to really talk about. Set scratched. So B2 set scratched, and I say that because I know, because I was talking here about there's other rolls, other 100 rolls which changes the value of B2 or B3, and so you could see here if this 100 D100 roll beats N7, then B3 is true and B2 is false, which is the next one. The only difference between this code for B2 and this code for B3 is this: set cut or set scratched. And that means that cut is a laceration. So that's how it determines whether or not you're hit first. and then it determines, oh well, maybe maybe it's not just a scratch, maybe it's a cut / laceration. And then it does, after it determines that, it does another roll for N6, which occurs here, which is basically the same, except it says set bitten. So that's how it determines how much damage you're going to take. And as you can see, resilient doesn't really play into this, and thick-skinned doesn't play into how bad your laceration or cut is. It just determines whether or not you got cut or scratched. So that's how that works. Now, one more thing that I want to talk about in this code is set scratched or set cut or set bitten. Now, we can look at it here. Let's get set scratched. Set scratch window. No, just set scratched. Set scratch. So this is the one that we're looking for, actually. Oh no, this is the one that we're looking for. It was a number and something called B. So the number was index, and this goes to get body parts, get set scratched, B false. The index for body part, you know, it probably means that 1 is head, 2 is neck, 3 is left arm, that kind of thing. So where you get hit, and then B, excuse me, we'll talk about when we look at that code. So set scratched is not in this particular set scratch is not in this area of code. So I'm going to go look that up. I'm going to set scratched, and we look here, and we can see that there's actually a body damage class as we expect, and a body part class. And that's where I'm going to look. And here's the body part class. And quickly I'm going to do set scratched. Set scratched. I actually want the call to set scratched. So this one, Boolean scratched B. Okay, let's not worry about that. If we just glance through this, scratch time, blah, 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 blah. But this is where it gets interesting. This generate zombie infection 7. 7, that's a weird number. Well, it's the number that we all know that scratched, the percentage chance that a scratch is going to be a zombie infection. Hey, that's cool. And I bet get cut, set cut, is going to be the same thing. Set cut, generate zombie infection 25. And then you could take a look at generate zombie infection here, where it rolls, where it predictably rolls a D100, and if it gets under 7 or 25, then it's true. So that part of what everybody knows is true. 7% chance of scratches being zombie infection, and 25% chance for laceration being a zombie infection. And one of the things that you notice by these calls is that there are no other factors that go into it. There's no, if you have a specific trait, if you have a special ability. So this means that in order to, if we were trying to mod it or something in the Lua code, it would be difficult to do or impossible to do, because there's nowhere we can say, oh yeah, but minus 5%, because we want to cut all the zombifications in half. We don't have that ability. It's hard coded in. And if IndieStone wanted to do it, they'd have to modify code like this to say, oh well, if you have a trait, it's 50%, or they'd have to modify the code here. So hard coded, 7% scratch, 25% laceration. I think that's it. But let's take a look at the traits again. We took a look at, let's see, thick-skinned, 23% less likely to be scratched, lacerated, or bitten. Where does that come from? Maybe it's an old version, but by taking a look at it, we can look. Thick-skinned, it looks like it's supposed to be 30%. Now I say looks like and supposed to be 30%. Thin-skinned, ThinSkinned, 30% more likely to get scratch light. Hey, that's a number that we were kind of expecting. But I'm suspicious of this code because, as I said before, N5 is lowering ThickSkinned is lowering N5 and ThinSkinned is raising N5. And then what we're doing is we're doing a D100 check that goes over that number. So just based on this, not looking at too carefully at anything in between and anything a decompiler might be hiding because of weird variable names, it looks like I'm suspicious. If I were working for IndieStone and I saw this, I would say, hey, can you double check this? Because it looks like ThickSkinned and ThinSkinned are actually doing the opposite of what they're supposed to do. And I think I'll pastebin something about this and I'll attach it to this video so that other people can look at it. But it looks like, one, that this is decreasing the chance that you're going to get hurt, or increasing the chance that you're going to get hurt if you have thick-skinned, and decreasing the chance you're going to get hurt if you're thin-skinned. The other thing that's a little suspect, is that in this one you're using divide by 1.3, which isn't the same as 30% reduction. You'd normally be multiplying it by 0.7 if you want a 30% reduction, because, well, let me check. Alexa, what is 100 divided by 1.3? Yeah, so this is 76.9. This actually is like multiplying it by 0.769, so it's like 77%. I'm not sure that that's the actual intent. 76.9 though, that would account for like something that if it were to say 23, is that what it said up here? Thick-skinned? 23% less likely to get scratched, lacerated, bitten. Oh, this is right. Or this is the number that looks like it intends to be. 23 because it divided by 1.3. Although, like I said, I suspect that these two have been switched because this should be multiply and this be divide, but I'm not sure. So that is my shallow dive into the Project Zomboid code relating to the traits resilient, prone to illness, thick-skinned, and thin-skinned, with a little bit of information about how damage is handled in Project Zomboid. So hopefully you like this video. If you looked at this code, or if you see a mistake that I've made, please point it out to me, because, you know, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes plenty of times. Also, I'd like to point out that, you know, I'm digging through this code a little bit and pointing out things that I think are a little bit wrong, and, you know, nobody's perfect. If you look through, I have lots of years of experience. If you look through all my code, you find plenty of stuff that you'd be like, oh my God, Ed, this sucks. What were you thinking? So, it wasn't that I wasn't thinking right. It's just you make little mistakes here and there. If you have any questions that you'd like to get answered through me looking at the code, then let me know. And if I like the question, and if the question seems popular, and it seems like something that I can figure out just by looking through the code and not spending way too much time digging into the code, then I'll probably do it. Okay, well, thanks for joining me. Here is my brand new outro. Thank you for watching this video. Ed looked at code and answered some questions. Now maybe someone should fix the wiki. This is the new outro. Subscribe if you